live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
You're good. You're on, baby.
Back and better than ever. Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. This is the problem. It wasn't anything on your end, Dom. This is the problem when you're trying to still promote the show on social media and stuff and maybe miss your cue. Probably the first missed cue I've ever had on this show. I'll be completely honest with you.
If that's your worst, we're good. We're fine, baby.
Back and better than ever. It is Sleepless with Steve. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. Beggars Night. Halloween Eve, whatever you want to call it, we are here. You know, I found out something really remarkable today, okay? So, for the radio station I work, we have to write a deluge of articles every single week. I won't get into it. But, so, I'm always trying to find stuff that's, like, local and centric to write about. Well, I learned this today via the Associated Press, that this will be the first year since 1938 that kids in Des Moines, Iowa, the capital of Iowa, will trick or treat on Halloween.
What?
Apparently, in 1938, the city of Des Moines passed a law to prevent, and I'm quoting the Associated Press, to prevent and crack down on hooliganism. They prevented trick or treating on the day October 31st. So, as it's been, trick-or-treating in the city of Des Moines and West Des Moines takes place on October 30th. Well, we got a pretty decent amount of rain here today, all throughout Iowa. And what happened was the city made the call to cancel trick-or-treating today, bump it to tomorrow, which is Halloween. So trick-or-treating will take place in Des Moines for the first time since 1938.
38? Oh my God, who are these hooligans? Were they fascists? Like, what the hell?
That's what I'm wondering. Like, well, that's the other story that, like, you can't find. It's like, what happened in 1937 in Des Moines for them to come up with this? Well, I'm amazed. You got to think, Catherine and I were talking about this. I said, you got to think about how much, obviously, since the late 30s, there's been so much
So much turmoil.
There's been so much turnover. Nobody ever looked at this thing, even in like the 70s, and was like, you know, this shit is really archaic. Why can't we be like the rest of the country? Like, honestly. And it's the other thing is, like, I would expect a law like that in like a 500-person town, not like the state fucking capital to have that law.
That's insane.
It was one of those things. I saw it because it was like, you know, syndicated news on our local news affiliate. I'm like, it's one of those things, even if you read it from a reputable source, you don't believe it. And then you Google, it's like, yep, sure as shit. This thing is true. Yeah. So there's your little factoid today.
Huh. Congratulations to the state of Iowa for,
it's the city of Des Moines specifically. Don't lump us all in there. You know, pretty much like 40% of Iowa, though, if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah, there you go.
But at any rate, that's your little Halloween factoid today. So we are talking today, We Live in Time. That is our big movie review today. Really, and it's one of those things, like, I'm happy to talk this movie, but, you know, retroactively, if I had seen these two movies before, I kind of wish we were talking Conclave. Wish we were talking Conclave. That was really good. Just an outstanding movie for what it was. But this one leaves us with quite a bit to talk about, too, so I don't think of it as a sorry consolation prize. We also finally have movie news for the first time since Christ lost his sandals. We're going to be talking about Clint Eastwood's final movie, Juror Number 2. The alleged final movie.
His third final movie, yeah.
His third final movie in the last 6 years. Yeah, because The Mule, I think all of us thought The Mule was going to be his final movie because it felt so perfect. Then he did Cry Macho, which we reviewed on the show, and it was like, oh, yeah, it's okay. It's pretty good. You know, it's decent.
I don't know if pretty good it was what I would give it. Is what I gave it.
No, you were meaner on that one than I think than I was for sure. Well, then you got Juror Number 2 now, which is getting the screwed by the by the iron fist of Zaslav over here. That's at
Hmm.
least what I'm chalking it up to being. So we will touch on that
It looks
before the end
interesting.
of the show. It does. It very much does. And again, Cry Macho's been 3 years now, I think.
Yeah.
So like it's been a considerable amount of time since the 94-year-old Clint Eastwood directed a movie. But we will touch on that though before we end the show today. But first things first, Dom, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We're getting ready for Christmas, baby. So, and I'll keep it as vague as possible there. But the truth of the matter is, it's a lot of outdoor work. It's a lot of preparation. It's a lot of cabling and getting silicone on your hands because you got to winterize all these cables and all these connections, and that's a lot of fun. But on top of that, had a lot of really good things. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the show. I do work for other podcasts. My whole life is not dedicated to solely Steve Pulaski. Sadly, I wish that were the case. The moment Steve Pulaski Enterprises is created as an LLC, I pledge my life to the Pulaski Empire. But for now, I do work for other podcasts. And this past Sunday, we went to Graceland Cemetery in good old Chicago, Illinois, and we got a nice tour. We had a nice public event, and that went very well. Tomorrow on Halloween, I'm going to be recording something with my friend for our Sonic the Hedgehog review podcast, our silly little thing. We might even do this is the last show before the election. This is the last show.
It is.
So
It is.
we'll see what plans go up to for my friend and I, Nick and I. But we may do some streaming, and then I'll he'll play video games, and I'll just keep tabs on the election. No one's gonna watch, but I think it's just be funny.
Do like an extended bit of what you did for the college radio station.
Yeah, pretty
I
much.
remember that. I remember your 11th hour, like 2:30, 2:15 in the morning address. I still remember that vividly.
I remember. I always tell this story. I printed out two scripts, one for Trump and one for Hillary. And then the Trump one was in all red, the Hillary one was in all blue, and I distinctly remember practicing the blue one a lot more.
No, because you gave me a peek of him. You gave me a peek of him in the newsroom
At the start of the night. I taped them to the desk, to the DJ area, and then and then that happened.
I still vividly remember that because it was
What a
supposed to
night.
be when Sleepless with Steve was on.
Yeah.
And I showed up to the station, and Blaine at the time, the station manager, at like 11:30. I got there early. I remember that night. And Blaine was like, he's like, you got to stick around in case the election gets called, then you can do your show. And I'm like, yeah, really, whatever happens tonight, they're really gonna want to hear me talk about whatever the hell movie I was gonna talk about that night.
You should look up the movies that were released then, so that you can remember what movie you talked about. I don't know.
Well, and I had time for one break after your address.
Right,
I
you
had
did.
time for one break, and I monologued briefly.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have it. I have not listened to it since I did it. I still have it. I saved every single break I did at Wonk. I swear to God.
I wish
saved
I had done
every
that.
single
I
break.
honestly wish I had done that. I just couldn't figure out the system at the time, or Adobe Audition at the time. It was very janky.
I was going back here and looking really quick to look at the American movies released in 2016. So it's obviously the first week in November. I was probably, you know what it was? You know what it was? It was going to be Doctor Strange.
The first Doctor Strange.
I remember I had notes made for Doctor Strange and Hacksaw Ridge.
Okay, there you go.
Those were the two I had notes for.
Wow.
And I remember I had them and I put them in my pocket. Then when I got to the radio station, I put them in my jacket pocket, and it was like, I'm probably not touching these tonight. But
Speaking of Andrew Garfield, we are talking about, what movie are we talking about, Steve?
We Live in Time. Sorry,
We
I
Live
didn't
in
freeze
Time.
out there.
No,
My
I know.
camera.
That's
My
okay.
camera's
I'm prepared. This is really fun game of Mad Libs where it's like whenever you freeze, I just finish the sentence.
I appreciate it. We'll talk We Live in Time, though. Brand new movie from a name I almost forgot. His name is John Crowley. You might need a refresher of what John Crowley did. He made the movie Brooklyn back in 2015. That was the one with Saoirse Ronan and Domhnall Gleeson. That was the one about the Irish girl who immigrates to Brooklyn, as if you couldn't tell from the title. And then she falls in love with, I think he's a Jewish boy. I think he's a Jewish boy, and then the family has to be at war with each other and everything. It was a really
Sure.
well done, a little bit schmaltzy but polished movie. It got a lot of Oscar nominations that year. Saoirse got nominated because it was before Lady Bird. It was 2 years before
Okay.
Lady Bird. And that was the one where it was like Saoirse Ronan arrived on like the critically acclaimed circuit. So I almost had to be reminded of, actually, when I saw that this movie was coming out, that, oh yeah, Crowley did do Brooklyn, which is shockingly already, what now, 9 years old, as it were. But this movie, We Live in Time, it stars Andrew Garfield, it stars Florence Pugh. This is a romance drama that is really, if anything, noteworthy and sort of, in my opinion, undone by its non-linear storytelling style, which I have a hunch that we are going to talk pretty extensively about tonight. I will say, you know what? For that being my chief complaint about this movie, is pretty good, because I'll say this movie belongs to a subgenre of romance movies that I am generally not a fan of. I have never found myself to be really in love or even see the attractiveness of the subgenre of romance movies that involves one of somebody dying of a terminal illness. And these movies were fucking ubiquitous at a certain point in time, like the last decade. You had The Fault in Our Stars. You had Me Before You. Before that, you had A Walk to Remember. You had
There's a
Everything,
bunch.
Everything.
Yeah,
Everything, which is actually probably the best recent example of the genre, because it kind of spins it on its head in the third act. But there were so many of these movies. 5 Feet Apart was another one with Haley Lou Richardson and Cole Sprouse. This has been like a genre of movies that has been bizarrely popular. And I've always just found these movies to be, for lack of a better term, kind of icky. I've also found these movies to often be very facile and insincere in their depiction of dying and the sacrifice it takes to stand by someone who's critically ill as well. I think that these movies, though, I think they're part of the reason is they're popular is because there's a fantasy element to it. I also say, too, that nobody can make dying look as beautiful as Hollywood, too, which I think is a big part of these movies as well. Everybody's impossibly still made up even when they're dying of cancer. In this case, the movie revolves around Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh, who play Tobias, Garfield's character. And oh my God, is this not one of the worst female character names you've ever heard? Almet. That's Florence Pugh's character, Almet.
Almet Brule.
Be that, it sounds like a gag reflex. Be that as it may. Tobias and Almet, though, they meet, trying to tell this movie kind of in like a chronological point. Andrew Garfield's character, Tobias, goes through a divorce. He meets Almet. Almet's a chef who's trying to compete in this like competitive culinary event that she wants to do. The two raise a kid. She gets diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And the bulk of the movie then, in its scrambled sort of narrative, tries to tell these like the story of these people and the fact that how initially Almet doesn't want to be a mother, but then becomes a mother and then wants to make sure that her kid just doesn't remember her as her sick mother who died very young and things like that. So that's kind of like the essence of this movie boiled down. And I'll say the fact that I'm complaining about the structure of this movie, I think rather than just the premise of it, I think speaks volumes to its quality, because I do think it's above average for this subgenre of movies, of romance movies. But I also think that this movie has some pretty serious shortcomings that are typical of its genre. What say you about We Live in Time, Dom?
This thing is really built on the back of Pugh and Garfield, like 1000%. It's very powerful performances, very good performances. I honestly can't deny that. These are two seasoned actors that have a ton of chemistry. There was that one story. I'm pretty sure this was an industry plant story, where it was like, reportedly Garfield and Pugh during a sex scene could not stop when the director was telling them to stop. And apparently that I think that was, again, just the PR team.
I didn't even hear that, but that's funny because I thought the sex scenes in this movie sucked.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, maybe that
That's
was
pretty
talking
funny.
about something else. Maybe that I should double check that story. Sorry, it's election season, so misinformation is running rampant, even for me apparently. No, the truth is, this is, man, you stole the words right out of my mouth with Hollywood makes dying look really, really good. Like, if you think, like, I've recently had to make like a financial, rundown of my situation, and I'm doing okay. But then when you look at these two characters, this isn't really a hard critique. It's more like a situational one where it's like, man, I wish my my issue was I don't get to, be part of a cooking competition while having this beautiful country-esque house in wherever the hell, with Andrew Garfield as my husband. The ovarian cancer does suck. I can't deny that. But these are two, it's the thing where it takes me out of it every now and then, just a little bit, where it's like, these are two really good looking people saying really, really cool things, for the situation. It's a movie. So, you know what? I can't blame it too hard for that. But no, the question for this film becomes, and I feel like this is going to be most people who watch it, the question becomes really, was being out of order really necessary? Did they really have to Pulp Fiction this movie in terms of its scenes? And could it stand on its own without it? Or is that what makes the movie? I don't think that's what makes the movie. I honestly really don't, because if they were going to do something really clever with it, where it's like, oh, gut punch, later, like towards the end, this is when you find out that they have cancer, right? That she has cancer, I should say. You can maybe play with that a little bit, and they do play a little bit with the time, but it didn't really seem as emotionally effective as I thought it was, or as I thought it had the potential to be. Because it's like, what is it? The second scene? I don't remember now, but it's like the second scene. It's like you find out she has cancer, maybe third. So it's not very far off. How they met, right? So it's bouncing around. You could say that it keeps it afloat. It puts it a cut above, as opposed to something really like cool and groundbreaking and amazing, right? So in terms of the out of order, I'm assuming it was even like We Live in Time. It's like playing with that, with the pun of the out of order situation that we have here. Maybe I thought for a second there was going to be like some time travel going on here, but no, that wasn't the case at all. But in terms of how this movie stands up, I thought, yeah, I'm with you, Steve. I think it's pretty damn solid, and it sounds like I'm doing a final review, but honestly, there's not too much we can chew on, other than the fact that Pugh and Garfield deliver really strong performances, and this chronology of scenes does give it some flavor. And I'll stop there.
I think the title, and I think what they're going for here, and when I say they, I mean not only John Crowley, but the writer too, Nick Payne. I think what they're going for here is the idea that, like, if you think about the relationships in your life, you're married to. Like, if you think about your relationship with Chelsea, or if I think about my relationship with Catherine, you can reflect on it. You remember when you first met and everything, and the first dates and stuff, but your memory is fungible to the degree that you remember certain events out of order. Sure. And you're sort of, you know what I mean? When you think about it mentally, you might remember, you put some memories above others and whatever. It doesn't all play out linearly in your mind. That's what I think it's going for here. It does, however, I mean, on one hand, while it keeps you a little bit more engaged, because I think the best thing that this structure does is how it's sort of how you come to realize sort of the timeline you're on early on and what led to what. And really I think the scene where the structure is the best, or really shows itself to be like an kind of moment, like that, is the scene when Andrew Garfield gets hit by the car. Mm-hmm. And then you're like confused at first, because you're like, hold on, why is he signing divorce papers? Oh, this is how they meet. Okay.
Yeah. That was probably the most clever thing that I got out of the chronology, where I was like, oh, is he divorcing Florence Pugh? No, that's actually how they met.
Right. So there's a little bit of a spin there that I think is interesting. But more often though, I think it just gets in the way.
I think so too.
I think
Did it confuse you? Did it confuse you at points?
Yes, at certain times. Like I'll give an example too. If you're not listening closely in the beginning scene, like there's it's dropped by the doctor that this is Florence Pugh. This is Almet's second time going through ovarian cancer.
Yes.
It was in remission. This is her second go of it, which kind of contextualizes the decision she wants to make about treatment versus, going at it naturally. Be that as it may then too. The chronology though works against the movie at a couple points. And most notably, it's the combative scene when Tobias reveals to Almet that he wants children. And she doesn't want children. But then in just a few fluttering scenes, she's then taking pregnancy tests and also fertility treatments.
That was earlier. Like it got
that was earlier. That was earlier. Yeah, that was earlier.
There was no yeah, you're right. Well, I was thinking that too. Because wasn't she just pregnant a bit ago? It kind of takes the wind out of this whole thing. It kind of makes Florence Pugh look kind of Almet's character, the character look kind of dumb. Because it's not dumb, but you know what I mean. There's egg on her face while that scene is happening actively, and it's well, this kind of it takes the power out of the scene a little bit because I guess I'm trying to be charitable. Could you say that's dramatic irony? Because we know something that I'm going back to English class here, right? We know something that the characters don't know. I didn't really get dramatic irony out of that. I got more so this is kind of silly that they're arguing about this, and we already know that where this ends up.
Yeah, no, and that was part of my issue with it too. Is that you see that scene a little bit beforehand, and then it plays out, and then the whole argument scene plays out, and it's this is knowing what we know now about these characters, this just seems perfunctory. Where if the movie played out linearly, then it would be oh, this is a kind of a tipping point of their relationship and things like that. The structure gets in the way of this thing, I think, more than it should. I think it overcomplicates what is ultimately a pretty streamlined narrative. I
will defend the attempt, but I gotta critique the execution because I'm with you on that because oh, okay, there's something very interesting here. I like Steve. Steve, you especially contextualize it very nicely. What if it's them remembering their relationship? Maybe not literally, but it's you can interpret it as being hey, remembering a relationship out of order. That's totally cool. I'm totally with that. You can make powerful narrative moves by placing things out of order. But that it just seemed it was kind of flashy for its own sake. No, you know what I'm trying to say here. It's just unnecessary. It's just unnecessary. And it's unfortunate because there is a very compelling story in terms of the critical question of because time we live in time is not just the chronology thing, but it's also hey, we don't have a lot of time because the clock is ticking on my life, and it's an eternal one, right? That's part of the human condition. Right. A very deep exploration into that very frightening situation that many, many people face. So
going back to the I mean, cut you off there.
No, yeah.
Going back to the fungibility of memory and everything, I made the comment in my review at stevepulaski.com. I made the comment in my review. I said, if you told the story of you and your spouse's journey together to a friend the way that We Live in Time tells us Tobias and Almet's, the phones would come out amongst your friend group very quickly. If you told the story if you told the story of your relationship like the movie tells us of Tobias and Almet, the discombobulation here I think is real. But what keeps this movie from being a total train wreck ultimately is Garfield and Pugh. They're very good together. There's evident chemistry there. And the one thing I did find ironic though is one of Florence Pugh's best scenes in the movie is when she lashes out at Tobias and basically says, I don't want her daughter to know me as somebody's dead fucking mom. And it's a great scene. It's a powerful scene. It goes back to what I say about these movies and why I find this subgenre of movies so flawed. You're just waiting for the character to die.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, yeah, she's a great chef and everything. I don't find her to be a three-dimensional character, and I find Tobias to be even less of a character than
Yeah,
she is.
yeah, it's very narrow in terms of they're not very fleshed out. Let me say that,
No.
right? Which is what I'm trying to say. In terms of it's very, yeah, you're right, one dimensional, extremely straightforward in what Andrew Garfield wants. I mean, to be fair, you can go into a very, very deep exploration into that very critical scene where it's like, no, I want a family. I want this. So it's like, no, I want to pursue my things first. And that is an extremely deep question that you could make a trilogy of over, right? But it kind of feels it feels very much to the wayside, right? And it almost feels like the cancer situation, I don't want to say betrays that idea, but well, maybe not, because it adds like a ticking. Well, no, because yeah, I feel like it adds an extra layer if you're looking for that exploration specifically. It adds an unnecessary layer. The cancer plot adds an unnecessary layer to the whole thing. And again, I don't want to fall into the critique habit of just rewriting a whole damn movie to make it fit my needs and tastes. But in terms of what we've got here, other than the performances, it's kind of cookie cutter, and the way the other than the delivery, which wasn't executed very well, it's like the chronology. It's difficult to really go any further than that. I really don't know how to. I mean, the kid did well. Kid did good. I think it was funny how they were essentially doing the Eurovision of cooking competitions. It seemed
That's
like.
really what it is. That's a good way to put it. The Eurovision of cooking competitions.
Yeah. I don't know if it's even a real thing. Let me just say real quick, I found the article here. So actually it was correct. This is a Variety article. I'm showing it on the screen right now. Andrew Garfield says sex scene with Florence Pugh in We Live in Time went a little bit further than intended. Quote, "We never heard cut." And so it's probably a press junket thing that then got, ran off into the.
You remember what Dakota Johnson did before Madam Web came out and said that it was weird acting in front of a blue screen and stuff. This is the opposite of that. This is the opposite.
That's so true.
This is the opposite of Madam Web truth serum.
That's really funny.
Yeah, overall though, like this movie, I almost feel bad for picking it for Sleepless, because I don't think there's a ton to really discuss about this movie, which I think is partly a flaw of the movie too. I don't think this is a bad movie.
No.
I think it's kind of a weird movie for A24 though, and I think it's just because A24 is so synonymous with like, higher quality stuff than this. But I guess A24 ultimately, sees the value in attractive dead people movies.
Yes,
or dying people movies.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. That context is very important, because, or at least into our discussion, just because this is several cuts above a Lifetime movie, right?
Oh, sure.
Or a Hallmark movie. We're not saying that, right? We're not shitting on it that hard or anything, or even at all. It's shot very interestingly. It's got great color, and in terms of the moments and the acting, it's executed very well. The moments are done really well here. It's engaging. I was very much engaged with it. But yeah, in terms of like as an A24 movie, it doesn't quite give off that kind of vibe. And by that, I mean, what okay, then that begs the question, what is an A24 movie? And that's an extremely broad spectrum, because we're not even saying like horror, right? That's you would think that's their bread and butter, but it's a little bit more to it than that. I just think it's got like indie feel.
Right.
It's got an indie feel to it, even though it's very much nowadays a lightning rod and a heavy hitter in so many good regards. I think A24 Civil War was their most expensive movie ever for that company.
I believe you're correct.
And that was only like $100 million, which in the pantheon of like, a Marvel movie will shit out $200 million movies all the time. So that, in terms of the context of blockbusters, that's still relatively cheaper. And so yeah, for me, an A24 movie, it's got it's got an interesting plot with it, with a indie feel. So high quality but indie feel at the same time. And
I agree.
We Live in Time has the aesthetics of that. It even has an attempt at that in terms of its storytelling. But when you actually sit down with the flesh and bones of it, like when you're actually experiencing it, it doesn't really amount to as much as you think. It is less than the sum of its parts. Does that make sense?
I agree with everything that you just said. I will also add that for A24, I think one of their characteristics is empowering the director and empowering the filmmaker and the visionary behind it. I think
this ain't no Marvel. This
ain't
ain't no Star Wars.
Yes, they're not director for hire projects.
Mm-hmm.
They're movies that are inextricably tied to the filmmaker behind them in some particular way, whether it's a tourist style, whether it is sort of a companion of their larger filmography, whether it's a thematic sort of representation of what the director or filmmaker believes. That, I believe, is also kind of baked into the A24 formula. Real quick, honestly, before we go to break, because we'll come back with closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Real quick, though, one thing to add, Civil War is A24's most expensive movie at $50 million.
Wow, that's insane.
That's their most expensive at $50 million. Now, I want to do a little game here.
That's insanely cheap for some.
It really is.
Because that is effectively their war epic. That's their big war epic, and that is, for 2024, insanely cheap.
That's a medium budget movie.
100%.
That's a medium budget movie. Real quick, though, before we go to break, I want to see if you can get this off the top of your head. The highest grossing A24 films exclusively in North America. Exclusively. Can you name the top three?
A24 movies highest grossing in North America.
Correct.
I'm just gonna go by Critics' Choice. So like Midsommar. Oh my God. Not Severance. No. What am I talking about? You know what I mean.
It won the Oscar.
Say again.
It won the Oscar.
It won the. Oh, yeah, I can't even think of the name. I can visualize it. Oh my God, it's their other big one that's like in the realm of Midsommar. That one, and then Skinamarink. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I don't know anymore.
All right, their top three. We'll go 3-1.
Yeah.
3 is Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems. Okay, I should have thought of that.
$50 million in America only.
Uh-huh.
2 is Civil War at $68 million.
I should have. I should have thought of that. Yeah.
And number 1 at $77 million North America and $144 million worldwide. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Oh my God! I keep forgetting that's an A24 movie. Yep. You're absolutely correct. You're 1,000% right. Wow.
Midsommar was a good guess. Midsommar was number 9. Fun fact: Moonlight outgrossed Midsommar by like $400,000.
Okay,
which sure. I would not have guessed. Other ones in the top.
That's that was the Warren Beatty bump from the mistake, from the Oscar mistake.
4-10 though. After Uncut Gems, you got for the highest grossing in America, A24. You got Lady Bird at 4. Talk to Me at 5. That was the horror movie last year. Mm-hmm. Hereditary at 6.
Hereditary, Jesus Christ, that's what I was trying to think of.
The Iron Claw at 7.
Oh.
Moonlight at 8, Midsommar at 9, and another Alex Garland movie rounding out the number at number 10, Ex Machina.
Forgot about that one. That's an early one.
A little bit of A24 trivia here while we're dancing around the closing thoughts of our movie of the moment here. We Live in Time. We'll be back here in just about 60 to 90 seconds. Take our Zoom sponsored intermission. Not only come back with final thoughts on We Live in Time, but also touch base on what the hell is going on with Clint Eastwood's movie. We will get into that all coming up here. No Joe tonight. Got Dominic Guanzon, no Gruesome Twosome in effect. We're live on Sleepless with Steve on this Wednesday evening. back and better than ever. It is Sleepless with Steve, back after our Zoom-sponsored intermission. We are live and in living color today, talking about We Live in Time. Played a little A24 trivia, though, since we don't have the usual amount of things to really dive into with this movie. I thought it was just kind of funny to, pull out some A24 trivia here. I was also looking at Box Office Mojo here, just in general, and they tend to go by like the worldwide box office and such. If you go by worldwide box office, the top 3 highest grossing A24 movies, the top 2 are the same. Everything Everywhere is number 1. Civil War is number 2. But Talk to Me is number 3. Talk to Me made 92 million worldwide. So that I thought that was pretty fascinating too. And then also another movie, and this is really because of the fact that it made the bulk of its money predominantly in like South Korea, but in top 10 highest grossing A24 movies worldwide, number 10, Past Lives. Last year's Oscar nominee.
Okay.
That only made about 10 million in America, but made about 35 million overseas. So it definitely was a bigger, overseas success. It was not in a ton of theaters, I think, even at its apex, even post Oscar nominations. But anyway, be that as it may. We Live in Time definitely feels, though, like kind of an above average Nicholas Sparks movie in so many ways. Like it's very technically accomplished. Its acting, I think, is a cut above what this genre typically is. This movie doesn't have the one thing that I will say is quietly remarkable and laudable about this movie. And it's part of me. I don't like doing it. I don't even think I mentioned this in the written review, but I don't like doing this. I don't like praising a movie for what it doesn't do. But with this movie, I like how this movie, outside of maybe 2 scenes, this movie does not have any like roaring symphonic scenes of emotion.
Yeah, like an Oscars like real kind of thing.
Quite frankly, I think the 4-star scene in what is, spoiler, a 2.5-star movie. The 4-star scene in this 2.5-star movie is the gas station scene.
Yes.
I loved everything about it. I love the initial tension of it when they get out of the car. I loved how Florence Pugh sort of plays like the sort of like dazed, out of it, sort of,
Okay. I forgot about the scene. The part beforehand where she is just going through and like silently groaning and being like, I want this, but not saying I want this, just like handing it to Garfield. It's like, I thought that was really funny. That was really good acting.
She plays it well. And then the initial fear that there's so many emotions in that like 6-minute scene. Then the initial fear when he can't find her. Like, he like loses her. It's like losing a kid in a mall. And then the way that the workers come in to save the day. I thought that whole scene was just brilliantly done. Like just staged and everything, acted I thought everybody was firing on all cylinders that whole scene, even the 911 dispatcher.
Yeah, I legitimately forgot about that scene, which sucks because I have to compliment it. That's on me. In terms of I'm assuming it's like a 2.5 out of 4. Yes. For me, I really do oscillate between 2.5 out of 3 because the acting here is quite good. They're and I'm not even going to say, they're doing the best they can with what they have, because what they have isn't bad at all. In fact, it's pretty good too. You know what? Yeah, I just remember that scene. I'll give this movie, I'll give this a very merciful 3 out of 4 stars. A merciful 3 out of 4, because if this movie had more scenes like that, I understand there needs to be highs and lows. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every scene needs to be like that. Not every scene needs to be funny and quippy or whatever. But I feel like it could have used a little more of the standout moments there. Well, I think it can still do that while maintaining its core principles, its core themes, and its core stories, which in and of itself are a little too straightforward for its own good, because we didn't have as much to talk about. We just really didn't. But I'll give it that it gives it's it ain't no Hallmark movie. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, there you go. I'll end it with that. Yeah.
Very good stuff. Good review. So 2.5 from me. I'm merciful, as he says. 3 stars from Dom on We Live in Time. One more thing. Actually it's not technically. I got to find out the actual answer to this question because I know somebody's wondering it out there. One of our 5 viewers is probably wondering this. Would you like to know what the lowest grossing A24 movie of all time is?
No, what?
It is a 2023 movie directed by Savannah Leaf. It is called Earth Mama.
Er,
It
well,
ma-
yep.
Earth Mama. It made $6,406 in theaters.
What was the release? Like one theater at 8 in the morning? Like what?
I'm trying to get an exact theater count here from Box Office Mojo. Its peak doesn't say because it was international. It did not get a theatrical release in America.
Oh, okay.
This was only in the United Kingdom, so there's not an exact theater count here. Actually, it actually has a couple noteworthy people in it. The rapper Doechii was in it.
I don't know who that is.
I am on a pop radio station. And then also you never saw Bones and All, did you?
No.
Taylor Russell co-wrote it. The
Okay.
actress from Bones and All. She was also in Escape Room. That's another movie I wouldn't have assumed you to see.
But I've heard you talk about it before.
But yeah, so that's the lowest grossing A24 movie.
As soon as you said it, I was be like, I've never heard it. Oh, yeah, that's why. Because it's the lowest grossing movie. Then of course I haven't heard of it.
$6,400 in theaters.
It won, apparently, according to what I'm reading, it won Outstanding British Debut Award at the 2024 BAFTAs. So it's not a bad movie. It's just
No, it's got high reviews. The 24 people who saw it loved it.
yeah.
You know, it's terrible. It's terrible, but it's true. It's crazy, but it's true, to quote the rapper Future. Anyway, moving on though. We'll talk about this. I do think we got to talk about this because I feel like nobody else is. I remember hearing that when he was shooting this movie last year, I believe it was. And, Clint Eastwood's one of those guys that like, this sounds bad too, but I mean it sincerely, is one of those guys who like, you kind of hold your breath when you see his name trending on Twitter. You know what I mean? He's 94 years old and he's still active as all hell. And he's got a new movie coming out this weekend. I forgive you if you've never heard of it because most people haven't. It's a movie called Juror Number 2. And it is got Nicholas Hoult in it. It's got Toni Collette. Chris Messina's in it. Zoe Deutsch is in it. Kiefer Sutherland, J.K. Simmons. You got a really rock solid cast of people in this movie. And it's basically about a man who is serving as a juror in a high profile murder trial, who's kind of like juggling with a moral dilemma while he's part of this jury. And it's about him rather like kind of internalizing whether or not to use this to like sway the jury verdict that could potentially free this accused killer. It's one of those movies where it's like a 12 Angry Men sort of plot where the one juror's got like a reasonable doubt that this guy did it, and he's wondering if he should propose it to the jury, and the jury seems pretty set on the evidence that he did commit the crime.
Yeah.
So it's a very 90-year-old Eastwood movie. I really think that. It's a very much a 94-year-old Clint Eastwood movie, but it's got stellar reviews. It's got a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment. So why the hell? It's coming out on tomorrow, technically, and nobody's heard of this thing, or it's not getting any buzz. I wish I had answers, and I only can offer sort of prognostication as to why. But I sent you an article about it too, or I think it was Joe, actually. I can't take credit. It was Joe who found this. It was supposed to come out on Max. It was supposed to be released on Max on November 1st. But essentially what happened, though, is it was reported, I think it was World of Real, reported that the film was going to be released by Warner Brothers in fewer than 50 theaters, and Warner Brothers will decline to report box office numbers, which I don't want to talk too windedly right now, but that's becoming increasingly more common now with studios, is not reporting box office numbers. I don't know if like they figured out they just don't have to now, or they just don't feel like it, or what's going on here. But there's a lot more movies now that are not reporting box office data. Be that as it may, Uh, this is a very strange thing. The Variety called this move a peculiar approach for a filmmaker who still has commercial appeal. And you go back to his last few movies. Obviously, American Sniper was nominated for an Oscar. You
Very
had
popular with the military.
very popular, one of the most
and
popular.
American kind of folks that are very much into that spectrum of history.
One of the most popular military movies, I think, of the last 15 years. You had Sully with Tom Hanks about the Hudson River plane landing. You had The Mule, which had that amazing Toby Keith song that charted after Toby Keith passed away earlier this year. And you had the other one that like I kind of forgot was between, even though I liked it, was kind of between The Mule and Cry Macho was Richard Jewell. If you remember that one, that's the one about the security guard who found that bomb during the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta.
Yeah,
And
that's
his
right.
life after that whole thing of people thinking he planted the bomb and wanted to be a hero and stuff. That was a pretty good movie with Paul Walter Hauser that I almost forgot about. But that one didn't do super well, though. Kathy Bates, who played his mother, got an Oscar nomination. She was outstanding in that movie. Even made me cry, I think, if I remember correctly. And then you had Cry Macho, which was his last one. Cry Macho, if you remember, too, not only was also a Warner release, but that was one of the last movies. It came out in September of 2021. We reviewed it on the show. I think it was probably one of the last 2 or 3 movies that Max was doing during the pandemic era where they would release it in theaters as well as on HBO Max. And that was I think one of the 2 or 3 last movies they did that with that year. Now you have Juror Number 2, which might be, I mean, I know we've said this like 4 movies ago now, but it might be Eastwood's final movie. And that's kind of how it's being billed in the press. Like The Mule was never reported to be his final movie, but anybody who saw that kind of felt that this could reasonably be his last movie.
And it's important to note that he's not starring in the movie. This is only directed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. He's a producer and a director on this. I do not know, and this is going to be the biggest mystery of this thing, is why the hell Warner has no faith in this movie, clearly. Because if they had faith in it, they would release it in more theaters. And this is, relatively speaking, not an expensive movie, but it's still a budget of around $35 million. And I've said this before on this show time and time again. I will never understand why a movie studio, even one as badly run as Warner Brothers has been over the last couple of years, I will never understand why a movie studio will deem a project worthy of giving $35 million to and not even give it a chance to release it. Just dump it in 50 theaters. Don't report the box office revenue. It might make $1 or $2 million in what very limited theaters it's in, but it's got no shot of making its money back. Now, because there's no P&A, there's no print and advertising, there's no marketing behind this movie, you're not going to be in it much more than you already are the production costs. The only thing that I can think of as to why this movie is not getting a formal theatrical release like Eastwood's other movies, the only thing I can truly think of is Zaslav was unhappy about Cry Macho and those other movies coming to HBO Max the same time they went to theaters. And because that Cry Macho didn't make its money back. Cry Macho was a pretty significant bomb.
It was like 17 million in debt or something. Not in debt, but loss. Okay, let me say. Cry Macho, let me just quote the article here. Cry Macho, that Western drama, which saw a non-Nigerian Eastwood directing himself as a former rodeo star. What a beautiful sentence. Finding redemption south of the border was a box office flop, grossing $16.5 million globally against a production budget of $33 million. So give or
about
take
the same
15,
here.
16, 17. Yeah, exactly.
About the same as Juror Number 2. The only thing I could think of is Zaslav is just dumping this thing. And Zaslav has also been like very much in favor of the theatrical experience, as we can attest. He's the one who said Blue Beetle should go to theaters. It shouldn't be exclusive to Max. This is like one of those situations where like Why not just release it on Max though? Are you too fucking prideful to do that then too? Are you too prideful that you're not giving it any kind of meaningful theater release here? I
Hmm.
don't know what they're doing. They're really shooting themselves in the foot with this one because I think that this movie, I think it, I don't see it losing a lot of money. I could see this thing breaking even, especially with Eastwood's name attached to it. It doesn't have very many marquee stars, but I still think that this is the kind of movie that at least breaks even more often than it doesn't.
Did you see a trailer for it in We Live in Time?
We arrived late. We
Okay.
arrived. We arrived like during the last trailer, so I did not see it.
I
Did
saw
you?
I saw a trailer for it. Yes,
Did you actually see a
I
trailer
saw a
for
trailer
it?
for it. That's why it was on my mind today. Other than of course the fact that Joe shared this article, but no, I saw it. I straight up saw it.
And that's so weird that they'll play the trailer for it, but it's not getting any kind of significant theater release.
No, not at all. There's
Why would you
no.
broadly market the movie if you have no intention of showing it to most audiences? And the 50 theaters, I guarantee you, 20 of those are going to be split between New York and LA.
It's
I
a half.
guarantee you.
Yeah, it's a half measure like cost cutting, or like quarter, like three quarters full, measure. Because yeah, you're saving money, quote unquote saving money on the marketing, but then you're still putting it out. So it not screams of, but it could very much be cost cutting, which is certainly what the Zaslav era is very much about, especially with the Batgirl situation, the Wile E. Coyote movie situation. It's such an interesting. I cannot wait for this era to be over for Warner Brothers, for HBO, etc., and for the sickest, fattest, longest YouTube documentary, 16 hours. You know how long they're getting these days. I want a full expose on what this era was like inside. Or just give me the HBO. Give me the HBO documentary on the Zaslav era of HBO. What a crazy ass doc that's gonna be. I cannot wait for it. I truly can't.
I'm right there with you, and we will review that on Sleepless when the time comes too. I was just checking. Juror number 2 will play at AMC River East in Chicago.
Okay.
So that is one of the theaters. It's going to be in all the big cities. It's going to be in all the big cities. It's not going to be really in the small cities. Obviously, there's only 50 theaters. But I feel it's worth mentioning because I hate to see a movie like this get shafted. I really do. But at the same time, you look at what Warner is nowadays, and it's like, what do they do well besides shelve movies and fuck over creative people?
Don't know. I
And
really don't know.
it's amazing here's the thing. I don't like to see anybody get screwed, especially young people like us. But you screw over the guys behind Batgirl, the same guys that were behind the later sequels to Bad Boys. Adil and Belial, that was the name of them. You screw them over. You screw over the crew behind Coyote versus Acme.
Yeah.
And this is Clint Eastwood. This is a guy who's been married to Warner Brothers for years.
Yeah, this is a particular like slap in the face to someone that's been very loyal to you and your brand for a very long time. And it's a legacy thing. It's a like he's Hollywood royalty. He truly is. And and look, I don't really care. Let me say that the fact that you mentioned it's playing in cities is kind of like bad strategy. They should be playing at twice the amount of small towns, in like smaller towns, conservative towns, rural towns, semi-rural towns, because that's the Clint Eastwood demographic, I think. So, maybe someone with the numbers will correct me out there, but I think that's that way to go. Like half wide release it to what, 200 theaters in Dubuque, Iowa, and I think it'll play very well there. But yeah,
I do too.
Yeah, to do this to Dirty fucking Harry, right? It's kind of, to do him dirty is in itself kind of weird for $15 million that you're saving. I don't know.
By definition, for what it's worth, wide release is defined as 600 or more theaters.
That's what I figured. So do like
600.
a half wide release or whatever the hell. Yeah,
Bizarre.
It's so weird. I can't. This has been another. This is the Zaslav era. It truly is our new tenant, our new our new a big news story.
And it sucks. It really sucks
Oh, it's so
because
sad.
the graveyard of these movies is going to be a mile high and a mile wide. At least Juror 2 is fucking coming out.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
at least that's actually going to be available to watch as opposed to Batgirl and Coyote versus Acme, which is still funny. I looked it up just now. There is still no clarity on what happened with Coyote versus Acme. There's no clarity on it. It is not confirmed if the movie still exists.
The NDAs are insane. The
Yeah,
NDAs
that's
on
what
this
it
movie
is.
are insane. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Like Batgirl's gone. That's confirmed to have been gone.
I
Coyote
kind of don't
versus
care.
Acme.
Coyote versus Acme, that is a critical piece of the human condition that must be reclaimed. Must be reclaimed and put in the Library of Congress, because it must be put in the Library of Congress, Steve, because that's crazy.
It's
I-
gone
honestly,
the way of the.
I am
It's
fully
gone the way of the day
expecting
the clown cried.
when someone leaks that thing online for 2 hours, I cannot wait for the movie to just kind of be mid, but damn, I want it to come out either way.
I want to see it. I don't care if I hate it. I want to see it. I feel like I'm being robbed something I didn't know I wanted. You know? That's our show tonight, though. Sleepless with Steve. It's been a great one, though. Only thing would be better is if we had Joe Viso,
Oh,
but we
yes.
will have him. We will have him in the future, though, for sure. Looking forward to next week. We're talking here. I don't know why I still get excited for Robert Zemeckis movies. I know
Yeah.
they're probably going to be heavy-handed and cloying and obvious and probably emotionally manipulative. I haven't looked at the reviews of here yet, but I can imagine those words
Oh,
are dropped
it totally
quite
is.
frequently. Quite frankly, but you know what? God damn it, I really like this concept. I really like this concept.
It's so gimmicky. I can't believe it. I can't
It's
believe
based
I'm
off a
actually...
comic strip. It's actually based off a comic book.
Hey, that doesn't even sound nearly as gimmicky for a comic book, but for a full-fledged movie, that's nuts, dude.
This is one of those movies I call, and even the trailer, as much as I'm like, oh, I'm gonna nitpick the living shit out of this. I was telling Catherine, I said, I'm looking forward to this. I hope it's good. Like this is one of those movies I call I'm not crying, you're crying the movie. This is one of those movies that's gonna get the boomer crowd weeping over here. But it's
Hell
Tom
yeah.
Hanks, Robin Wright. We will tackle that next week to start off November, the first show of November. Everybody will be talking politics. We're going to be talking movies here, and that's what I want to do. That is exactly what I want to do to keep myself sane and hopefully you sane as well. That's our show tonight, though. I appreciate you watching. As always, highlights posted on this YouTube channel on which you are viewing the show right now. For Dominic Guanzon, Unseen Basil, very much love, Joe Viso, and yours truly.